I know many of us have been there, sitting, waiting, watching the clock tick by as we convince ourselves that the right time is just around the corner. Maybe you've heard it said before, wait for the right moment. And you've been holding out, waiting for everything to fall into place, for all the stars to align, for the perfect set of circumstances to come together before you take that first step. But let me tell you something. The truth is, you may be waiting forever if you keep waiting for the right time. There is no such thing as the right time, not in the way we've been conditioned to think about it. For some reason, we think that when the timing is perfect, we will have all the answers, the resources, the energy, the confidence, and the certainty to move forward. But what if I told you that you could be paralyzed by waiting for the perfect time? What if I told you that waiting for everything to be just right could be the very thing that keeps you stuck? What if I told you that the thing you are waiting for, the breakthrough you are praying for, the step you want to take, might not come until you take action in spite of the uncertainty? Listen, we've all been there. We've all told ourselves, if I just wait until things settle down, or if I just wait until I feel more ready, or if I just wait until I've got everything I need. We've all said the time isn't right yet. And for some of us, we've been waiting for years, thinking that when the right time finally arrives, everything will change. But the reality is, the right time may never come. We have to make the decision to stop waiting and start moving forward, even if we don't feel ready, even if we don't have all the answers, and even if the timing feels all wrong. There is so much beauty in the mess, in the messiness of stepping out before you feel fully prepared, because that's where faith grows. It's easy to believe in God when everything is lined up perfectly. It's easy to trust when the path ahead is clear, but faith is born in the unknown. It's born in the moments when you don't have all the details, when the way forward isn't fully lit up, and when you have no clue what's going to happen next. It's in those moments that you have to take a step anyway, trusting that God will meet you in the midst of the uncertainty. We've been conditioned to wait. Society tells us to wait for the perfect moment, wait for the stars to align, wait for everything to be just right. And that's the way we live our lives, waiting. But the problem with waiting is that it can be a form of inaction. You can end up sitting for years, waiting for something to change, but nothing changes until you get up and make a move. Nothing happens until you decide to take action, even if you're not sure how it will work out. I'm here to tell you that your breakthrough, your answer, your miracle might never come until you stop waiting and start moving forward in faith. And I'm not talking about waiting for everything to be easy or for the path to be perfectly clear. I'm talking about deciding to take the first step, even if it's hard, even if you don't know what's coming next, because that's where growth happens. That's where your faith is built. You don't have to have all the answers. You don't have to know how everything is going to turn out. The only thing you need is a willingness to start. When you take that first step, the next step will appear. When you start moving, God starts moving with you. It's not about waiting for everything to be perfect. It's about trusting that God will give you the strength and the wisdom for the next step, even if you don't know what it looks like yet. You've been holding on to the idea that the right time will come. You've been waiting for your circumstances to change before you act. You've been waiting for your feelings to line up with your actions. But sometimes faith is about acting in spite of what you feel. It's about moving forward even when the timing doesn't feel right. And the truth is, the perfect time may never come. You may never feel fully ready, but you are called to move forward in faith, trusting that God will provide what you need along the way. It's easy to get caught in the trap of thinking that everything has to be perfect before we take action. We wait for the perfect moment to start the business, to pursue the dream, to have the difficult conversation, to forgive, to take the leap. But what if I told you that the perfect moment doesn't exist? What if I told you that your moment is now, even if you don't have everything in place? Your dream is waiting for you to step into it, not when the stars align, but when you decide that you are no longer going to let fear, doubt, and insecurity control your future. Here's what you have to understand. If you're waiting for everything to be perfect, you're missing out on the life God has called you to live. He's not waiting for you to be perfect. He's waiting for you to take that step of faith. And I'm not saying it's easy. I'm not saying it's going to be simple, but there's something powerful that happens when you stop waiting for the right time and decide that now is the time. When you start moving, you activate something in your spirit. You activate a new level of faith, a new level of trust, a new level of perseverance. You stop being passive and start being proactive. You stop waiting for the right time and begin making the right time. Because the truth is, there is no right time. There's only the time you have right now. I want to encourage you today to stop waiting for everything to be perfect. Stop waiting for the stars to align. Stop waiting for your circumstances to change. The time is now. Your dreams, your purpose, your future, it's waiting for you to take that step. And I promise you, you'll never regret it. You'll never regret taking the first step, even when it feels uncertain, because that's where growth happens. That's where your faith is stretched. That's where you discover that God can use you even in the mess, even in the uncertainty, even in the imperfect timing. Don't wait any longer. Don't let the fear of the unknown stop you. Don't let the belief that the timing isn't right hold you back. Your moment is now. Step into it with confidence. Step into it with faith. And step into it knowing that you don't have to have it all figured out. All you need to do is take that first step, and God will meet you there. When you move, He moves with you. When you step forward in faith, He will give you what you need for each step along the way. The right time is now, and you don't have to wait another second. You might have walked through some seasons in your life where everything felt like it was slipping through your fingers. Like the very things you've worked so hard for, the things you've prayed for, the things you've trusted God for are all suddenly gone. Some of you might have lost relationships, you might have lost opportunities, and some of you might even feel like you've lost your own sense of hope. I want to tell you something today, and I don't want you to let the weight of your circumstances make you doubt this truth. God will restore what you've lost. When you look at the mess in front of you, when you look at the broken pieces that are scattered all over your life, I know it can feel impossible to imagine a time when it'll all come back together. But let me tell you something. God is the master of restoration. There is no situation too far gone, no brokenness too deep, no hurt so great that God cannot bring healing and restoration. If you're sitting there thinking, but I've been waiting for a long time, I understand. I understand how easy it is to get discouraged when you've been praying, when you've been trusting, when you've been waiting. But hear me when I say this, just because you haven't seen it yet doesn't mean it's not on the way. There's a story in the Bible about a man named Job. This man went through unimaginable loss. He lost his wealth, his health, and his family. Everything was stripped away from him, and he was left in a place of devastation. You've probably heard this story before, but I want you to hear it in a new way today. Because even though Job went through all that suffering, the story didn't end there. Job didn't stay in his brokenness. In the end, God restored everything he had lost. And then some. God gave him back more than he ever had before. And here's what I want you to understand. Just because you're going through a season of loss doesn't mean it's the end. In fact, it might just be the beginning of God's greatest restoration in your life. I know what you're thinking, but my situation doesn't look anything like that. My story isn't going to turn out like Job. And I get it. It's hard to see restoration when you're in the middle of the storm. But that's exactly when you need to keep your eyes on the truth that God is a restorer. You can't look at the brokenness around you and think that this is all there is. No, there's something greater ahead of you. God is not done with your story. I know you might feel like your best days are behind you, like what you've lost is irretrievable. But I want you to hear this. What you've lost does not define you. The pain you've experienced does not define you. The mistakes you've made do not define you. You are not defined by what has been taken away from you. You are defined by the God who promises to restore you. But here's the thing. God can't restore what you're not willing to give back to Him. Sometimes we're so focused on what we've lost that we forget to open our hands and release it back to God. We want to hold on to the hurt, the disappointment, and the bitterness because it feels like we're still holding on to what was taken from us. But the only way for God to restore you is for you to release those things into His hands. You've got to trust that He knows what He's doing even when you can't see it. When you let go of the things that you've been holding on to, you make room for God to move. Restoration doesn't happen when we try to fix it ourselves. Restoration happens when we allow God to do what only He can do. He's not asking you to have all the answers. He's not asking you to have it all figured out. He's simply asking you to trust him, to believe that he can make something beautiful out of the ashes of your life. And I know it's hard to believe that sometimes. I know that there are moments when you look around and all you can see is emptiness. But I'm here to remind you today that even in those moments, even when it feels like you're standing in the rubble of your life, God is working behind the scenes. Restoration is a process. And it doesn't always happen in the way that we expect. But when God restores, he doesn't just give you back what you had before. He gives you more. He gives you better. He gives you what you didn't even know you needed. I'm reminded of the story of Ruth. Ruth lost her husband and her situation seemed hopeless. She could have given up. She could have walked away from God and said, I've lost everything. What's the point? But instead, Ruth chose to stay faithful. She chose to follow God even when it didn't make sense. And because of her faithfulness, God restored her. Not only did she find a new husband, but through her, the lineage of King David was established. God restored her in a way she never imagined. She thought she was just going to be left alone, but God had something far greater in mind. You might feel like you've been forgotten. You might feel like your dreams are too far gone, but I'm telling you that God's plans for you are greater than you can imagine. Restoration isn't just about getting back what you've lost. It's about God bringing new life to the areas that were once barren. It's about God doing something in you that you never thought was possible. And here's the thing about God's restoration. Ruth lost her husband and her situation seemed hopeless. She could have given up. She could have walked away from God and said, I've lost everything. What's the point? But instead, Ruth chose to stay faithful. She chose to follow God even when it didn't make sense. And because of her faithfulness, God restored her. Not only did she find a new husband, but through her, the lineage of King David was established. God restored her in a way she never imagined. She thought she was just going to be left alone, but God had something far greater in mind. You might feel like you've been forgotten. You might feel like your dreams are too far gone, but I'm telling you that God's plans for you are greater than you can imagine. Restoration isn't just about getting back what you've lost. It's about God bringing new life to the areas that were once barren. It's about God doing something in you that you never thought was possible. And here's the thing about God's restoration. You're thinking, it feels too good to be true. I've been waiting so long for something to change. I understand the weight of that feeling, but I promise you, God is faithful. He is not a man that he should lie, and he promises that he will restore what you've lost. Hold on to that promise. Even when it feels like you're in the middle of a storm, even when the winds are raging and the waves are crashing, God is faithful. He will not leave you where you are. He will restore you, and when he does, you will see that the restoration is even better than what you lost. So hold on. Hold on to the truth that God is a restorer. Hold on to the truth that he is working even when you can't see it. He has not forgotten about you. He has not left you to wander in the wilderness. He is walking with you through the valley, and he will bring you out into a place of restoration. And when that time comes, you will look back and see that what you lost was nothing compared to what he has prepared for you. When you're in the middle of a struggle, when you're watching the things you've worked so hard for slipping through your fingers, it can feel like nothing will ever change. The waiting, the uncertainty, the unanswered prayers, it all begins to weigh heavy on your heart. You ask yourself, why is this taking so long? Where is God? Why does it feel like nothing is happening? But I need you to hear this truth. Restoration takes time. I know how hard it is to wait. I know how frustrating it is to see the brokenness around you and feel like nothing is shifting, nothing is moving, nothing is being repaired. You might be sitting in the middle of a season of silence, waiting for that miracle, waiting for that breakthrough, and it feels like the clock is ticking, but nothing is changing. And in those moments, it's easy to feel like God has forgotten about you. It's easy to feel like your pain is going unnoticed, like your cries are falling on deaf ears. But I want you to know something powerful. Even when you can't see it, God is working. The waiting isn't wasted. It's during this time of waiting, when it feels like nothing is happening, that God is doing the deep work inside of you. It's in those moments of stillness and silence that God prepares you for what He's about to restore in your life. You may not understand why it's taking so long, but I promise you it's because God is preparing something greater than you can imagine. He is doing the kind of restoration that requires patience, trust, and a deeper level of faith. Think about the story of Joseph. Joseph had a dream when he was young, a dream that showed his family bowing down to him. But before that dream could be fulfilled, he was betrayed by his brothers, thrown into a pit, and sold into slavery. He went from being his father's favorite son to being falsely accused and thrown into prison. Years passed, and it seemed like everything in Joseph's life was falling apart. But during those years, God was working. He was shaping Joseph's character. He was preparing him for the position that Joseph would one day hold, the position of power where he would save his family from famine. The restoration didn't happen overnight. It didn't happen in the way Joseph expected it to, but it happened in God's perfect timing. That's what I want you to hold on to today. Restoration takes time. God isn't in a hurry. He isn't bound by time the way we are. He sees the bigger picture. He knows what's coming even when you don't. And while you're waiting, while you're sitting in the silence, He is working on your behalf. Even when it feels like you're stuck, He is moving. Even when it feels like nothing is happening, God is doing something deep in your heart, in your mind, and in your spirit. You might be looking around at your life and thinking, how much longer, God? How much longer until things change? How much longer until I see the restoration I've been praying for? And I know that cry of the heart. I know the pain of waiting, the ache of feeling like you're in the same place day after day with no breakthrough in sight. But here's the truth. God's timing is always perfect. The wait is not a sign that God has forgotten about you. It's a sign that He is preparing something good for you, something that will come in His perfect timing. The waiting isn't punishment, it's preparation. You're being prepared for something greater than you can see right now. You're being shaped into the person you need to be in order to handle the blessing that's coming your way. Without the waiting, without the refining process, you wouldn't be ready to handle the restoration that God wants to bring into your life. It's in the waiting that God strengthens your faith, deepens your trust, and teaches you to rely on Him, not on your own understanding. When we're in the middle of the storm, when the waves are crashing around us and the wind is howling, it's hard to imagine that anything good could come out of this season. It's hard to imagine that the pain and the tears are leading somewhere. But I want to remind you, God is using this time to prepare you for the promise He has for you. You may not see it now, but in the waiting, God is working. He is strengthening your character, increasing your faith, and positioning you for the restoration that's coming. Consider the story of the Israelites in the wilderness. God had promised them the promised land, a land flowing with milk and honey, a place of rest and blessing. But before they could enter that land, they had to spend 40 years wandering in the desert. 40 years? That's a long time to wait, especially when they knew that the promise was right in front of them. But during those 40 years, God was doing something powerful in them. He was teaching them to trust Him, to rely on Him for their daily provision, and to wait for His perfect timing. When the time was right, He brought them into the promised land. The waiting was part of their journey. The waiting was part of their restoration. I know you might be wondering, but why does it have to take so long? Why can't I see the results right now? I get it. I know how hard it is to wait. But here's the thing. If God gave you the restoration you're asking for right now, would you be ready for it? Would you be in the right place emotionally, spiritually, and physically to handle the blessing He wants to give you? Sometimes the delay isn't because God is holding out on you. It's because He's preparing you to be able to carry the weight of what He wants to give you. Think about a tree. When a tree is planted, it doesn't shoot up overnight. It takes time for the roots to grow deep, for the trunk to grow strong, and for the branches to spread out. If you tried to rush the process, the tree wouldn't survive. It's the same with you. God is giving you time to grow, to deepen your roots in Him, to become strong enough to handle the restoration that's coming. The waiting is part of the process. And I know it's hard to see that right now. I know you're tired of waiting. I know the pain of feeling stuck, the frustration of seeing others around you moving forward while you feel like you're standing still. But let me encourage you today. your waiting is not in vain. God is not punishing you. He is preparing you for what he has in store. His timing is perfect, and he is going to bring about the restoration you've been praying for. It may not happen on your timeline, but it will happen in his perfect timing. So in the waiting, don't lose heart. Don't give up. Trust that God is working in ways you can't see. He is preparing you for something greater. The restoration will come, but it will come in God's perfect timing. And when it does, you'll see that the wait was worth it. You'll see that the restoration was more than you could have imagined, and you'll be able to look back and say, God's timing was perfect. He knew exactly what I needed, and he delivered in a way that was beyond anything I could have asked for or imagined. Trust in the process. Trust in the waiting. God is working, and the restoration is coming. There are times in life when the weight of everything you've lost feels unbearable. It's easy to think that the things we hold on to, our hurts, our disappointments, our fears, are a part of us, like they define who we are. When you've lost so much, it feels like a part of your soul is missing. Those pieces of you that were taken, the dreams that didn't come true, the relationships that fell apart. It's easy to let them define you. But here's a truth that I want you to hear. In order for God to fully restore what you've lost, there are some things you have to release. This is one of the hardest things to do, I know. It's hard to let go of what's been stolen from you. It's hard to let go of the hurt, the resentment, and the disappointment. It feels like if you release it, you're letting the pain win. It feels like you're letting go of the very things that once mattered the most to you. But here's the reality. When you hold on to the hurt and bitterness, it keeps you from stepping into the restoration that God wants to bring into your life. Release is not about letting go of the value of what you lost. It's about giving God the space to heal and restore you. When you release, you allow room for God to do what only he can do. Bring healing, wholeness, and a better future. There's a reason why Jesus said, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest." Rest doesn't come from holding on to everything we've lost. It comes from surrender. It comes from letting go of the weight we were never meant to carry. And I get it. It's scary to release. It feels vulnerable. It feels like you're letting go of control. But that's where true restoration begins, in the release. When you hold on to the hurt, when you hold on to the resentment, when you hold on to the fear that comes with loss, it's like you're holding a heavy stone in your hands. Every day you carry it, every day it wears you down a little more. You think you're holding on to it because you don't want to forget, or because you want justice, or because you feel like you need to protect yourself from getting hurt again. But in reality, it's this very stone that's keeping you from moving forward. It's this stone that's holding you back from receiving what God wants to pour into your life. You're holding onto the pain, but the pain is holding you back from experiencing peace. The resentment you're carrying is keeping you from receiving forgiveness. The fear of being hurt again is keeping you from trusting, and until you let it go, you'll never be able to fully step into the future God has for you. You see, God's restoration isn't just about fixing what was broken. It's about transforming what was broken into something new. He wants to take the broken pieces of your heart and your life and create something even better. But in order for that to happen, you have to give him those broken pieces. You have to let go of the weight that's holding you down so he can heal those parts of you that are still hurting. You have to release the things that no longer serve you, your anger, your bitterness, your fear, your past, in order for God to make you whole. Think about it this way. When you go to a doctor with a wound, the first thing they do is clean it. They remove the dirt, the infection, the things that could cause further damage. It might hurt for a moment, but that's necessary for healing to happen. In the same way, God wants to heal you, but first, he has to remove the things that are infecting your heart. He wants to take away the anger and bitterness that are keeping you from moving forward. He wants to take away the fear and disappointment that have built walls around your heart. But in order for that healing to happen, you have to release. You have to allow him to clean out the old so he can bring in the new. The process of releasing isn't always instantaneous. It's not always easy. There will be days when you feel the pull of your old hurts, when you want to pick up the stone you've let go of and carry it around again. But that's when you need to remind yourself of this truth. You are not meant to carry this weight. You were never meant to carry the burden of your past. And while it's tempting to go back to what you know, while it's tempting to pick up those old wounds again, you have to trust that God knows what's best. You have to trust that He's going to make all things new. I know it's hard to let go of things that have meant so much to you. People, dreams, plans. But in letting go, you're not saying that what you lost doesn't matter. You're not saying that you don't care about the things that hurt you. What you're saying is that you trust God with your future. You're saying that you trust His ability to restore, to rebuild, and to bring new life into what was once broken. You're saying that you believe that His plan for you is better than the one you could have created for yourself. When you release, you're making room for something greater, something better, something that you can't even begin to imagine. And I know how painful this can be. It's not easy to release something you've held on to for so long. It's not easy to let go of the pain, the disappointment, and the fear. It's not easy to trust that something better is coming when everything around you feels like it's falling apart. But I promise you, when you choose to release, you're making space for God to move in your life in ways you can't even imagine. You're opening the door for restoration to come into your life in ways that go beyond your wildest dreams. When you release, you're not losing anything. You're gaining everything that God has in store for you. You're gaining peace, joy, and healing. You're gaining a future that's filled with hope. You're gaining the ability to move forward, free from the weight of the past. So don't be afraid to release. Don't be afraid to let go of the things that have been holding you back. God's restoration is coming, and the only way to fully step into it is to release the old and make room for the new. It's hard, yes, but I believe with all my heart that when you release the things that have been holding you down, when you let go of the hurts and the wounds, God will fill you with something greater than you ever imagined. Your healing is coming, your restoration is coming, and it will be more beautiful than you ever dreamed. There's a moment when you're looking at everything you've lost, everything that's fallen apart, and you can't help but wonder, how will I ever be whole again? Can I ever truly recover from this? It's easy to think that when everything you've known is taken away, you'll never feel the same. You'll never be the same. The weight of what's missing presses so hard on your heart, and it seems like the pieces of your life will never come back together. But I need you to hear this. Restoration doesn't always happen in the way you expect. Sometimes what God is doing in the depths of your heart and soul is far more significant than what you can see on the surface. I know it's easy to look at the brokenness, the pain, and the disappointment and feel like it's irreparable. It's easy to think that you'll never see the beauty that was once there again. Maybe you've lost relationships, or you've watched your dreams fade into the distance. Maybe your heart is heavy with grief, or you're facing the aftermath of failure and regret. And in those moments, it's tempting to think that the beauty of your life is gone forever. But I want to remind you that there's a different kind of beauty waiting to emerge, a beauty that comes from healing, from restoration, from God's loving hand working in your life. God's restoration is not simply about putting things back the way they were. It's not about just fixing what was broken. It's about making something beautiful out of the brokenness. It's about creating something new, something better, something that could only come from God's healing touch. The restoration God brings is not just about returning things to their original form. It's about transforming what has been lost into something more powerful than you could have imagined. I understand that right now you might feel like you're just hanging on by a thread. Maybe the pieces of your life don't seem to fit together anymore. Maybe you've been through so much pain and hurt that it feels like the person you were before is a distant memory. You may wonder, is there even a way forward? Can anything truly be restored when it feels like I've lost so much? The answer is yes. Yes, God can restore. Yes, He can take the broken pieces of your life and make something new, something better. Think of the story of a potter and the clay. When a potter sits down at the wheel, the clay begins in a raw, shapeless form. But with the right hands, the right pressure, and the right process, that clay can be transformed into something beautiful. The potter molds and shapes, and sometimes the clay might be remade and reshaped because it wasn't quite what it needed to be. It wasn't perfect yet. And that's how God works with us. Sometimes we go through seasons that break us, that shake us, that force us to confront parts of ourselves we'd rather ignore. But it's in those seasons that God is working. He's shaping you, molding you, preparing you for something greater. He's not just putting things back together. He's making you new. And when he's finished, you'll be more beautiful, more whole, and more complete than you were before. You see, restoration isn't about returning to the past. It's about moving forward into a future that is even better than what you could have imagined. It's easy to get caught up in the nostalgia of what was, what you had, what you lost, what you wish could have been. But God doesn't want you to get stuck in the past. He wants to take you to a place where the pain, the heartbreak, and the losses are no longer chains that hold you back. He wants to set you free, to restore what you've lost in a way that will enable you to walk forward with strength, with purpose, and with hope. In the Bible, there's a verse in Joel 2:25 that says, I will restore to you the years that the swarming locust has eaten. This is one of the most beautiful promises in the Word of God. No matter what the enemy has stolen from you, God will restore it. It may not happen in your timing or in the way you expect, but God's promise is sure. He will restore. He will give back the time you feel you've wasted, the opportunities that slip through your fingers, the moments that you thought you had lost forever. He will bring beauty from the ashes of your life. Your future will be brighter than your past, and the restoration will be so much greater than you can comprehend. I know it's hard to see this in the middle of your pain. I know how easy it is to get lost in the feelings of hurt, disappointment, and frustration. When the storm is raging, it's hard to imagine that something beautiful is coming. But that's where trust comes in. Trusting God means trusting that He knows the path, that He's working behind the scenes even when we can't see it, when you don't see the progress, when you don't feel like things are moving forward. Remember this, God is still working. He is still restoring. His hand is still on you, and He is shaping you into the person you need to be for the next chapter of your life. You see, restoration isn't a one-time event, it's a process. It takes time, and sometimes it feels like you're not getting anywhere. It feels like the pain is never ending, like the pieces of your life will never come together again. But this is where the beauty of God's restoration lies. It's not about instant fixes, it's about the slow, steady process of healing and rebuilding. God is doing something in you that will last. He's making you strong. He's refining you. He's preparing you for what's to come. But here's the most important thing to remember in the process. God is with you. He's with you in the pain. He's with you in the waiting. He's with you in the uncertainty. And when the time is right, when He's done working in you, you'll see the restoration in ways that will surprise you. The relationships, the dreams, the opportunities, whatever was lost will come back to you, and it will come back better than before. You won't just be whole again. You will be more than you were. You'll be stronger, more resilient, and more beautiful than you ever imagined. You may not see it now, but God is building something great in you, and the beauty that will emerge from your brokenness will be a testimony of His faithfulness, His love, and His ability to restore. He hasn't forgotten you, and He never will. His promise is clear. He will restore what you have lost. Trust in His timing, trust in His plan, and hold on to the hope that no matter how deep the pain, no matter how broken things seem, He is making all things new. You are being restored. You are being made whole, and your future is brighter than you can imagine. There are moments in life when it feels like the weight of everything you've lost is more than you can bear. You stand in the rubble of what was once your life, and it feels like the pieces scattered around you will never fit together again. You've lost people, dreams, opportunities, and sometimes even your sense of purpose. The ache in your heart seems relentless, and you begin to wonder, will things ever be restored? Will I ever be able to move on from this pain? Will I ever see the goodness of God in the midst of all this loss? In those moments when your soul is tired and your heart is broken, I need you to hear this. Even when you can't see it, God is working. Even when everything feels uncertain, He is doing something behind the scenes that you cannot yet comprehend. His plans for you are bigger than the pain you're feeling right now. The journey to restoration might not always be smooth, and it may not look the way you expect, but the end result will always be worth it. When we go through loss, it's natural to feel that part of us has been taken away. It's as if we're missing something that can never be replaced. You might feel like you're walking through life with a hole in your heart that nothing seems to fill. But here's the truth. God is not in the business of taking away without giving something back. His heart is for you to be restored, to be made whole again, and to see the beauty come out of the ashes of your life. I know it's hard to understand this when the pain feels so raw and real. It's easy to think that the hurt you're feeling will define you forever. It's easy to look at what you've lost and think that you can never recover. But the thing about God's restoration is that it is never about going back to how things were. It's about moving forward, stronger and more complete than you ever thought possible. His restoration isn't just a repair job. It's a transformation. It's a redemption of everything the enemy has tried to steal from you. It's about him taking the brokenness and making it into something that reflects his glory. You may not understand why you've had to walk through seasons of loss and pain. You may not see the bigger picture right now, but I want to remind you that God's vision for your life is far greater than your own. He sees the beginning from the end. He knows the plans he has for you, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you a future and a hope. When you're walking through the dark seasons, it's hard to believe that these plans still hold true, but they do. God's promise is unshakable. He will restore what has been lost, and he will bring beauty out of the brokenness. You don't have to understand it all right now. Just trust in his faithfulness. There's a verse in Romans 8:28 that says, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Notice that it doesn't say that all things are good. It doesn't say that the pain you're experiencing right now is good, but it says that God will work everything, even the hardest moments of your life, for your good. He takes the worst of what we go through and uses it to shape us, refine us, and prepare us for the blessings he has in store. The journey of restoration isn't just about getting back what was lost. It's about becoming who God created you to be in the process. When we lose something, we grieve. Grief is a natural part of loss. It's painful and it takes time to heal. But let me encourage you with this. Your grief doesn't mean that you won't be restored. In fact, your grief is a part of the process. It's a necessary part of the healing journey. You're not being punished for grieving. God understands your heartache. He sees your tears. He knows the depth of your pain, and he is right there with you in it. In fact, in the middle of your grief, he is working in ways you may not see yet, preparing you for the restoration that is coming. God's restoration is not just about replacing what was lost. It's about healing you. It's about filling the empty spaces in your heart with his love, his peace, and his hope. The losses you've experienced may have shaped you, but they do not have to define you. You are not your grief. You are not your brokenness. You are not your failures or your regrets. You are a child of God, and he is in the business of redeeming every part of you. When you experience restoration, you will find that you are not just made whole again. You are made new. You are made stronger, more resilient, and more equipped to face whatever life brings your way. Restoration doesn't just return you to where you were before the loss. It takes you beyond that place. It takes you to a place of greater strength, deeper faith, and more profound joy. It brings you to a place where you know beyond a shadow of a doubt that God has been with you all along, working in the background to bring you to this moment of restoration. But here's the thing about restoration. It doesn't always happen the way we expect it to. We want quick fixes. We want to heal quickly. We want our pain to go away right now, but God's timing is different. He knows what you need, and he knows exactly when you need it. His timing may not always match up with your expectations, but trust me when I say this, it's always perfect. What he's doing in you right now, in the waiting, is preparing you for what's to come. Don't rush the process. Don't try to skip ahead. Allow yourself to grieve, to heal, and to trust that God is working in the midst of it all. When you find yourself in a season of waiting for restoration, don't get discouraged.